Lagos, Nigeria. In the humid haze of dawn, the city's skyline bears witness to ambition. Amidst the chaos of traffic and the rising sun, there once stood a luxury apartment, its glass facade shimmering, its promises etched into glossy brochures. Elegance, safety, stability. That's what they sold. A sanctuary above the city's bustle, where families could dream, invest, and thrive. But behind the manicured lawns and marble lobbies, a silent countdown had begun. Because just 3 years after the grand opening, reality crashed through the facade. Literally, on a morning like any other, with the city's heartbeat pulsing below, the unthinkable happened. In a matter of seconds, the impossible became the inevitable. Floors folded into one another, concrete surrendered, and the proud tower crumpled like a child's paper model. 44 lives lost, dozens more crushed, scarred, or orphaned. The city, always brash and bustling, fell silent. The only sounds were sirens, the wails of loved ones, and the distant echo of a question, how? The first reports spoke of construction flaws, a phrase so vague, it's almost a comfort. But for those who know buildings, for those who trust in the science of steel and stone, that wasn't good enough. It wasn't an accident. It was a riddle, and the clues were buried in the debris. When a building collapses, it doesn't die in silence. It leaves a message, a post-mortem in cracks, in fractured beams, in the way the rubble settles. We arrived at the site not just as engineers, but as detectives. Helmets on, boots crunching through powdered concrete, laser scanners in hand. The air was thick with dust and disbelief. What we found chilled us. The concrete, which should have been as tough as stone, crumbled to powder under our touch. Steel rebars, once the backbone of modern construction, bent under the lightest pressure, twisted and useless. Where there should have been strength, there was surrender. Where there should have been order, there was chaos. We pored over the blueprints, both digital and paper. On our tablets, the original design was clear. Robust beams, sturdy columns, reinforcement every 150 millimeters. But the building that stood here had not followed these instructions. Our scans showed beams that were far thinner than allowed, columns that were barely up to code, reinforcement that, in places, was spaced more than 400 millimeters apart, enough space for a child to crawl through. This wasn't one bad decision. It was a symphony of negligence. Every part of the structure had been betrayed. To uncover the full truth, we needed more than just measurements. We took samples, chunks of failed beams, twisted rebar, and crumbling columns. In the lab, the story became clearer and more damning. Concrete should be strong, measured by its grade. The design called for M25, a mix that could withstand 25 newtons per square millimeter. But our tests showed the mix was barely M15, weak, porous, and unfit, even for the lowest standards. The steel rebars, meant to hold everything together, were worse. Instead of standard certified steel, we found counterfeits, low carbon content, irregular ribs, and no trace of certification. Real rebar stands up to stress. These snapped like dry twigs, failing tests that wouldn't even challenge the legs of a cheap chair. The collapse was not a mystery of physics. It was a betrayal of trust. The building's bones, the beams, the columns, the very frame that held up hopes and dreams, had been forced to lie. On paper, everything looked perfect. In reality, corners had been cut, materials swapped for cheaper substitutes, and lives put at risk. Digging deeper, we looked at the documents, digital blueprints, contracts, permits. Something didn't add up. The files provided by the project team looked too clean, too perfect. Our forensic software revealed telltale signs, tampered PDFs, altered numbers, erased signatures. Steel tonnage had been quietly reduced. Column widths resized. Stirrups, the steel ties that prevent beams from snapping, spaced wider and wider apart, all at the click of a mouse. We found an anonymous worker willing to talk. His voice, disguised for his safety, told us what we feared. They told us to ignore the specs, said no one would ever check. Steel was too expensive. Just follow orders. He paused. We didn't know lives were at stake, but someone did. This wasn't a slip. It was a decision a chain of choices that put profit before people. On the morning of the collapse, a new load was added to the building: rooftop water tanks filled to capacity. That extra weight triggered a domino effect. The already overstressed beams cracked. The floor above sagged. Load was transferred to the columns, which were already too slender, too weak, too few. In just 17 seconds, the entire structure folded in on itself, a progressive collapse in real time. What failed first wasn't the concrete or the steel, it was the ethics behind them. We traced the corporate trail. The company that managed the project was a shell, a paper entity with no real address. There was no licensed structural engineer on any document. The site engineer had vanished weeks before the incident. The final building permit was signed by no one, just a blank line. The project manager was a ghost. No record, no license, nothing but a name and a WhatsApp number. To some, those are signs of bureaucracy gone wrong. But to us, they are evidence of something worse. A system where failure isn't an accident, but a feature. We pressed on with our forensic tests. The rebar failed at 250 megapascals, a fraction of the 415 megapascals required. Concrete compressive strength? Just 12.5 newtons per square millimeter, half the minimum. Curing records were missing. The quality control checklist was blank, unused, as if never needed. Some say this is the price of doing business in a developing country. But the truth is simpler and more painful. This is the cost of disregarding life, of pretending that numbers on a page can be ignored without consequence. When corners are cut, people pay. In blood. The numbers in Lagos are not isolated. Across Nigeria, the pattern repeats. Between 2022 and 2024 alone, 135 building collapses, at least 26 dead. In Lagos State, more than half of all such incidents nationwide. Each one a tragedy, each one a warning ignored. The root causes are always the same: substandard materials, poor construction practices, and a regulatory system that looks the other way. The Standards Organization of Nigeria, SON, runs campaigns, holds meetings, and issues guidelines. But the recurrence of these tragedies shows that enforcement is weak, and accountability even weaker. The Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN, has called for all hands on deck: engineers, architects, developers, regulators. They want unity, collaboration, and above all, responsibility. But words alone cannot hold up a building. The Nigerian government is now being pushed to enforce compulsory insurance for every construction project. The logic is simple. If developers know they are financially liable, maybe they'll think twice before cutting corners. Maybe. But the beam never lies. It cannot pretend to be stronger than it is. Its job is to bear the truth, to hold up the weight it was designed for. When humans force it to lie, when they fudge the numbers, tamper with the blueprints, and pocket the savings, the truth comes out sooner or later. It comes out in dust and screams, in funerals and headlines. This wasn't just a collapse. It was a confession. A confession of shortcuts, silence, and a system designed to fail. There are families tonight without fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters, because someone decided that profit was more important than safety. For those left behind, justice is slow. Investigations drag on. Courts get bogged down. Memories fade, but the loss does not. For those of us who build, who design, who inspect, the lesson is clear: you cannot look away. You cannot pretend that good enough is good enough. Because every shortcut, every lie, every unsigned permit is a loaded gun pointed at the future. In every piece of debris we sifted through, in every failed test, in every blank line on a document, we saw the same message. This could have been prevented. This should never happen again. To the families who lost loved ones, our hearts break with yours. Justice is not enough. Only vigilance, only honesty, only a refusal to accept mediocrity will honor your loss. So next time someone says the beam is strong enough, the design is good enough, the materials are close enough, remember this story. Remember the beam that lied. And know that the beam cannot lie. Only humans can, and when they do, the consequences are written in rubble and blood. In the end, the ruins remain as a warning and a memorial. Candles flicker at the edge of the site. Photographs of the lost flutter in the breeze. And the city moves on, until the next time. But it doesn't have to be this way. Every engineer, every builder, every official has a choice. To listen to the truth of the materials, to respect the science, to value life above profit. To refuse the easy lie, because in engineering, even the tiniest shortcut can become someone's last breath. Let this tragedy be more than a headline. Let it be a turning point. May the loss of 44 souls not be in vain. May their memory force us all to confront the truth, to demand better, to build safer, because the beam never lies, humans do. And only humans can choose to stop. Subscribe, like, comment, and share for more on Vital Axis.